Good evening and welcome to the Gold, Goats, and Guns Hour here on YouTube and Periscope. My name's Tom Luongo. I hope everybody's having a good evening. Let's talk about sanctions. So it's Friday. It's August 10th. It's 2018, and I think the beginning of the sovereign debt crisis that I've been handicapping for quite a long time now has begun. Why do I think that? Well, today we finally had a breakdown in the euro that we've been waiting for quite a while. The euro has been holding serve at about $1.15.5 or higher for about 6 months now. And with the announcement today by the Trump administration that they would be doubling the tariffs on Turkish steel and aluminum imports, that was the kind of straw that broke the camel's back, and straw that broke the lira's back, to be honest with you. The Turkish lira has been under heavy pressure for months now, moving from below 3 to the dollar to today spiking over 6.5 and close to 7 at one point. Did not hold anywhere close to that, and today might be the kind of moment of maximum pain that I've been waiting for a while. But that situation with Turkey is very complicated, and there's a lot to talk about. And I've got an article up on my blog right now at Gold, Goats, and Guns that you can check out to try and that I'm going to go over bits of right now. But what's important to understand is that the situation is complicated, but it really boils down to very basic stuff. Ready? Turkey's been a member of NATO since the 50s. They are moving away from wanting to be a member of NATO. They are siding with Russia and China and Iran on issues of extreme import to what's left of the reputation of the American empire. If Turkey were to continue to defy U.S. edicts on geopolitical imperatives in the Middle East and in Central Asia, it would incur the wrath of the United States, who does not want NATO to break up, who does not want a change in the global political order. Turkey is way too important geographically, it's way too important militarily to NATO, and way too important to everybody's plans for, well, I hate to say it, for world domination. And it's always been that way. And Erdogan, the president of Turkey, understands this. And he's come to understand that the U.S. does not respect state sovereignty around the world, does not respect anything other than its edicts and its wishes. It's really that simple. And it's not really just the U.S., it's really the people who stand behind the U.S. government. So you have to understand that that's what the core issue is here. So for the past couple of years, President Erdogan in Turkey has been working at odds with the U.S.'s desires in Syria, and now is actively working against the Trump administration's desire for regime change in Iran. And as these things play out, Erdogan is openly defying the United States. Because the truth of the matter is that if Erdogan wanted to make nice with the U.S. over any of these issues, he could have done so months ago. The Turkish lira has been in free fall for a couple of months now. Turkish sovereign debt has been getting killed for a couple of months now. And the strengthening of the U.S. dollar hasn't been that strong, that hasn't been that much that it would warrant this kind of extreme behavior. And so what I mean by extreme behavior in the forex markets and in the bond markets. Things don't fall this far, this fast without help. period. When Goldman Sachs comes out last week and says, or earlier this week says 7.1 to the dollar is the point at which all the Turkish banks fail, that's Goldman saying they're going to short the Turkish lira to 7.1. It doesn't mean that the Turkish economy is going to collapse at 7.1. It just means that that's as far as Goldman knows it can take it without, in order to try and push the market in the direction that they want to, because they're short, because they know what the policy is. So there's a lot of reasons why the United States is angry with Turkey. It's not just the pipeline that's going in, the Turkish Stream pipeline. It's not just them buying S-400s. It's not just Pastor Brunson, their refusal to send him home. You know, if the United States wanted him home so badly, they'd give up Gulen, who Erdogan has asked for 3 years now. These are not the actions of two countries that are acting like allies. And yet Article 5 of NATO would be invoked if Turkey were attacked by outside forces. Not that that's going to happen, because Turkey's friends at this point are not the other members of NATO. Erdogan is ticked off with the EU for treating him like a second-class citizen, for wanting to get into the EU. It was never a good idea to try and push Turkey into the EU in the first place, which is why he kept shaking the EU down for more money. Turkey was destabilized by the situation in Syria, even though Erdogan went along with it early on, thinking that he was going to get most of northern Syria in compensation. He sent most of those refugees out of Turkey and into the EU. Erdogan is not going to respect Trump here. Croman, you are way off base as to what's happening here. If Erdogan was going to respect anything Trump had to say here, he would have done it 2 months ago. He would not have let things get this far. This is strategy. What this comes down to, RB Tools is completely right. All these reasons can be reduced to the fact that Erdogan refuses to turn his nation into a vassal state. What he's trying to do, and what I think is actually happening here, is that, and this is the really complicated part, and this is the part that y'all are going to look at me like I got 4 heads. But I'm telling you right now, this is what's going on. And I go over it in my blog post today, and I went over it as well on in a 10-minute YouTube video as well. What's going on here is that this is strategic. Turkey is almost inviting this pain, because Erdogan understands that there's a path to independence. And that path to independence is getting rid of the dollar and removing the dollar from its economy. And that's not going to happen willingly. As long as the dollar is cheaper as long as it's cheaper to borrow in dollars than it is to borrow in Turkish lira, there is no incentive locally for Turkish businesses to borrow in Turkish lira. Period. This is the whole point of the way the Fed runs its economy, way it runs its policy. We've been in a 40-year bull market in U.S. Treasury bonds, with rates always being slightly lower than the rest of the world, which makes our debt attractive, and it makes it also attractive for emerging markets to load up on dollar-denominated debt. And Turkey's corporations did exactly that, to the tune of over $200 billion. Turkey's government is not in danger of collapse because of too much debt and capital flight out of the country, thanks to dollar-denominated sovereign debt, because that's not what they have. They've got Turkish lira-denominated sovereign debt. But this is a classic situation where the Fed makes money cheap, everybody goes out and borrows in it, and then when they pull the punch bowl back, and they start to raise rates, and everybody gets caught short. Happened in Thailand, happens every 3 or 4 years, whenever the Fed has to change policy. So, and that's the dynamic. And then when these countries get into trouble, then they have to go to the IMF for a bailout, for a loan, and then the process starts all over again. And you keep these countries on the hook by keeping them indebted to the IMF and in these IMF restructuring programs over and over and over again, so that they never actually get out of the crisis. Evening, Sterling. How are you? It's been a while. I think Pastor Brunson. I think he's a CIA asset. Well, what other reason would we have for wanting to go to war with a NATO ally? Over. So the reality here is that Turkey is trying to extricate themselves from this situation. They have a very low government debt to GDP ratio. They're not in any need of an IMF bailout, but that's exactly what everybody's calling for, because everybody on Wall Street and in the city of London and in Frankfurt, they're hurting right now because they're all sitting there naked, unhedged, with all these banks that go belly up. And they're worried about their book. Turkey's sitting over there going, hey man, we don't have that much debt as a country. Yeah, our corporations are fucked. And who cares? At the end of the day, who cares? We don't have to bail these people out. And Erdogan's like, I'm not going to bail you out. As a matter of fact, now he gets to find out who's actually loyal and who's not. He gets to find out who works for Turkey and who doesn't. In the same way that Putin found out during the ruble crisis of 2014, 2015, who works for the betterment of Russia and who doesn't. Yes, I did, Thordoom, I did catch the news that Erdogan and Putin spoke. Of course they're preparing to do, they are preparing as to what to do next. Think about it this way. The Russians just sold $100 billion worth of U.S. Treasury bonds. They're sitting on $100 billion. Did anybody not catch this part? This kind of popped into my head. They sold $100 billion in 6 weeks worth of Treasury bonds. You think they swapped all that out for yuan? The Russian state is sitting on a $100 billion pile, just waiting to be distributed properly. So think about it. I absolutely think that the United States was behind the coup. Run out of insular, because as a matter of fact, today, Erdogan just came out and said, members of the Turkish government came out and said today that they want to, question members of the U.S. military at Incirlik because they consider them traitors. So this shit's real. This is not going to go away tomorrow. This is going to get bigger and better. Absolutely, the United States was behind getting rid of Erdogan. Erdogan, I've gone over this in multiple YouTubes, in multiple live streams, and multiple blog posts. What the timeline is very simple. It's that after the shoot down of the Su-24 by Turkey, supposedly by Turkey, which also was a false flag, was shot down by it was probably down by the U.S. It was absolutely not an accident. And it was designed to frame Erdogan for being angry with the Russians for outing his complicity in selling oil for ISIS. Because ISIS was trucking their oil across Syria and then selling it and selling it in Turkey. And Erdogan's son was the guy in charge of those sales, and the Russians made all that public. And then 3 weeks later, the Turks, in retaliation, shoot down a Russian Su-24. Bullshit. that was designed to start a war between the Russians and the Turks, because they don't have a nice history together. They don't like each other. So that was all designed. And then over the course of the next 6 months, what happened, 6 to 9 months, was that Erdogan realized that he was being set up as the fall guy for creating ISIS, and started to extricate himself from the situation. He was talking to Assad behind the scenes. He started restricting movements of Al-Qaeda and ISIS through Turkish territory. It's the whole reason why they were able to break the siege of Aleppo, because previous to that, they were able they were able to resupply around at the Kurdish enclave at Afrin from Idlib into Aleppo and back again through Turkish territory. And by the way, passing right by the Incirlik Air Force Base. All of this stuff is absolutely, there's no other reasonable explanation for it. So if Erdogan is getting off the reservation and is pulling out of backing the removal of Assad in Syria, that's enough to get rid of him. Absolutely, that coup was backed by Western forces, period. And since then, Erdogan has gone on a fucking purge of everybody he considers a friggin' traitor, and it's been played in the West like he's a madman. Not saying that Erdogan's not a madman, because I've called him the ultimate political cockroach many, many times. And it's not like I like Erdogan, because I don't, okay? But understand things from his perspective, and it's very obvious. And as Sterling's pointed out to us on multiple occasions, Iran was instrumental in helping Erdogan survive. Putin tipped him off to what was happening. He was able to get out. They got him into Iran, and then he orchestrated the counter coup from his iPhone from a bunker. And that started it. And from that moment on, Putin then had Erdogan as an ally. Done. This is over. Now all it's a matter of, after that, is simply playing it all out. And this is part of the process of playing it out. Yes, Gulen is, of course, CIA. No, I remember you telling me that, Sterling, and I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. So this is what's going on. This is why we are where we are. And now the hammer drop. The United States is going to push with as night follows day, as water is wet. The United States is not going to let Turkey off the hook. And so what do you think you do? You do what we always do. We just trash their currency. We trash their bond market. We trash their credit rating. We do all of this stuff because we can't actually bomb Turkey. Why? They're a NATO ally. I think Erdogan's getting very close to wanting to arrest American troops for the coup. Thordoom, I will not be surprised if that does not happen in the next 24 to 48 hours. I think Erdogan's plane was tracked, but I don't think Erdogan was on that plane, Joanne. I think he was tipped off well beforehand by Putin. So, Turkey has not left NATO. This is the prelude to that, Buck. Good evening. How are you, bud? So, this is where we are now. And so, we could see this coming months ago. This has been brewing for months. There are American troops at Incirlik. We use Incirlik as a staging ground for most of our Mideast operations. What's Trump got to gain from all this? Not getting lynched by the being allowed to stay in power by the neocons. I think the term is Pray for Mojo. I think the term is woke. Just to piss off the one or two shitlibs that might actually ever watch this. And yeah, you're all our shitlibs. I'm not even like fucking around anymore. The nuclear weapons at Incirlik. I doubt they're still there. User 13. I'm sure that we pulled our nukes out of Incirlik a while ago. No, I don't think all troops are out of Turkey. Yeah, so Turkey has been absolutely defiant every step of the way here. They're not going to stop buying Iranian oil. They're not going to stop doing business with the Chinese. The Chinese are their biggest trading partners. I've gone over all this in multiple blog posts, guys. I've been talking about this for 2 months now. Because Turkey wants off the reservation, Buck. That's why. Because Turkey's preparing to leave NATO. Because Turkey is going to de-dollarize their economy. And that's what this is all about. I think this is a classic freaking judo move or a classic aikido move. Let your opponent overextend themselves. Let them sanction everybody. Let them pull all of this crap. Like I said just 5 minutes ago, the Russians are sitting on $100 billion pile of dollars. They sold all of those treasury bonds. Do you think they went out and bought like Euro bonds with that crap? Are you kidding me? Turkey is not a part of the BRICS yet, but Erdogan last week said he would like to become part of the BRICS. So, the way this is going to play out is you're going to see this push as hard as possible to try and get regime change in Turkey. Chinese are devaluing the yuan. We're putting sanctions on Russia, which has pushed the ruble down 5%. You're buying Russian oil. You're buying Iranian oil. You're buying the Iranian rial is getting crushed. So it doesn't matter if you're Turkey and you're buying Iranian oil and you're doing it on the Shanghai exchange in yuan. Who cares about the dollar Turkish lira exchange rate? The people who care about this are the guys who loaned Turkish corporates $222 billion. Those are the ones that are screaming right now. And Zero Hedge had an article this morning as all this started, saying the Financial Times was out this morning immediately saying this is bad for Europe because the three biggest banks that are exposed to this are Unicredit in Italy, who's already a zombie bank, BNP Paribas, the biggest bank in France, who's already a zombie bank, and another bank in Spain, BBVA, I think, or whatever, and another one that's already a zombie bank. So guess what? And if they're not hedged properly, they're on the fucking hook for this. They've gotten crushed. Okay? You understand that the coupon payment stays the same, but you still get paid back. If they can't get paid back, because if they default on the loans, these guys are fucked. And that starts the contagion risk across the entirety of Europe. And that's why I think this is your inciting incident for the sovereign debt crisis. We needed an incipient incident. We needed a geopolitical moment of absolute fuckery, for lack of a better term. I'm like not particularly eloquent tonight. I'm gonna like crash the minute this thing is done tonight. I'm really tired. It's been a long day. So a Turkish default would be disastrous, RB Tools, exactly. And all the Turkish central bank has to do, and they already told everybody what they're going to do. They're going to do what the central bank is supposed to do under these circumstances. Keep liquidity running in the local currency market. Swap out the bad corporate paper that's denominated in dollars. Go raise dollars and pay that stuff off. Reissue the debt in Turkish lira to pay to keep that running. And let everybody else go belly up. And like I said, Erdogan is going to use the litmus test is going to be whether or not you're working for Turkey or not. And he's going to have these guys by the short and curlies the same way that frickin' Putin did this. Putin used the ruble crisis of 2014 to purge so much of the financial sector in Russia, which was still under the control of the frickin' US and Europe. And he just crushed those guys. And then they all staged a coup in March of 2015 against him. He was gone for, remember that period where he was gone from the news for about 10 days? Putin's never gone from the news for 10 days. Yeah, there was a coup in the Kremlin. There was a putsch. Because he fucked those guys over. And then he fired Kudrin. And then he fired his longtime economic advisor, Alexander Kudrin, 4 or 5 months later. Okay? And he got Elvira Nabiulina, the head of the president of the Bank of Russia, to heel. He brought her to heel. He's also, if you notice, he's brought Medvedev to heel. Medvedev was out there this morning saying, you guys put these kinds of sanctions on us, we're considering this war. This is Medvedev, who's literally effectively been an American fifth columnist for years. But even he's woken up to the situation. Because the liberals in Russia, as the Saker points out to us all the time, the liberals in Russia are almost reflexively pro-Western and xenophobic. And they hate the Chinese and they love the West. Well, that's changing with how badly the Americans are pushing the Russians. At some point, you know, everybody comes to the realization, oh my God, this is just terrible. And then it gets even worse than that when you really start to factor that in and you start to factor everything that's going on with Bill Browder. And you realize that Browder was the mechanism by which the Browder and the Magnitsky Act was the mechanism by which it opened up this whole friggin' sanctions can of worms anyway. So I was talking to Lee Stranahan about this morning. Yeah, I mean, but Erdogan loves to talk out of both sides of his mouth. Remember, Joanne says the confusing thing is that Erdogan is still calling for the overthrow of Assad because he's pissed he's going to lose his territory in northern Syria. Why do you think the Chinese are moving into Idlib? This is to make sure that this is the price that Erdogan pays for staying in power. If the Chinese are going to bail him out, then he's not going to get to keep any of Syria. Because the condition that everybody gets to play here, the condition that everybody gets to keep their heads, is that the Russians get to, and the Chinese get to dictate what happens, what the final construct in Syria looks like. But Erdogan will always try and keep his feet in on both sides of the fence, on both sides of the line, just in case the political winds shift the wrong way. Then he's ready to, shuck and jive and move over that way. So he'll always say, hey, let's get rid of Assad. Meanwhile, he's back channeling discussions with Assad. This is Erdogan. This is what he does. Trump is not acting. Look, Trump is a very interesting problem. Okay, because he's getting bad information. Okay, he's getting bad information. He's got bad preconceived notions about the way all of this stuff works, and he wants. And his first instinct is to do whatever's in the best interest of America. And Trump's an authoritarian. So Trump will use whatever he has to get what he wants. And if that means continuing the bluff and continuing to rain fire and brimstone down and continue to escalate until everything blows up, well, that's what he's going to do. Because that's all he knows how to do. So this is fascinating how this is playing out. This is unbelievable how this is playing out. Realistically, who is the most powerful force in the Mideast today? The Russians. Without a doubt. And the Iranians. No, it's not. It's not Mattis. It's Bolton and Pompeo and Haspel and the rest of the friggin' Israeli, Jared Kushner, all the dual citizenship friggin' Israeli firsters that are all around him, because all of this is about Israel. Israel wants all of Syria. WDM pops up. Russia is building 6 to 8 military police outposts along the Syria-Golan Heights border. Who would have thought that we'd see Russian soldiers there? I did. It's the only way we're going to get a grand bargain in the Middle East. You have to bottle the Israelis back up inside their border and allow the Iranians to go home. Oh, Pompeo is I'm a giant douchebag, and my name is Mike Pompeo. Did you ever ever watch Archer? Archer spoofed Cyril's answering machine message. I am a giant douche, and my name is Cyril Figgis. Does Iran want to push Russia out? No. Iran wants to go home, Sterling, and the only way to get any kind of grand bargain in the Middle East that will stick is for the Iranians to go home and for the Russians to ultimately be the police there. Lindsey Graham says that's a pipe dream. That's because Lindsey Graham works for the Iranians. Yeah, Mike Pompeo is not trustworthy. He's also not smart. What about Little Miss APAC? Notice how she's not in the news. Because she played all of her cards at the UN and got her ass handed to her. The neocons think that they're winning here. And they can't wait to get rid of Trump and install Mike Pence with Nikki Haley as vice president. I am not sure that Trump is 10 steps ahead. I am sure that Putin is 10 steps ahead. I don't think Trump is that subtle. I give him more credit than his detractors do, but I don't think he's playing that kind of 4D chess, dude. I just don't. I don't think he's that. I just don't. He's just not that detail oriented. I mean, he's good. I think he's smarter than people give him credit for. Right. Reconciliation, you're right. Iran will be in Syria as long as it's necessary to stop the Saudis. I agree with that. But I think I think we're closer to the day when Iran can go home than a lot of people believe. No, Israel and Saudi Arabia are not the main players. I don't think they are. He won the election because he was a great campaigner. That doesn't make him a brilliant geopolitical strategist. Okay? One thing is in his wheelhouse, media, and manipulation of media. It's in Trump's wheelhouse. He has a preternatural understanding of how U.S. media cycle works. Geopolitics is completely different. Well, they impeached Trump and the Saudis are on amazingly shaky ground. The Trump is doing everything imaginable, and the neocons doing everything imaginable to keep the Saudi state from imploding. We're starting to drop frames. I'm not sure. So that's what we've got. So hold on for a second. Let me just make sure that, because we're losing frames here. Give me just 1 second. Neil, you're not streaming anything, are you? Okay. All right, well, we'll see if we can keep going. I don't really have very good bandwidth right now. So, none of the sanctions stuff is going to work ultimately. And yeah, no, I had some bandwidth problems for a couple of minutes. It looks like it's improving. So give it a minute. Yeah, I don't know what happened. I'll bet you that. I'll bet you somebody in the household was trying to load something that shouldn't have been loaded. Yep. Friday night at 9 o'clock, Soapy. No YouTube. So what do you think about the WTO ruling about the Russian energy projects can't be restricted in Europe against other projects? I think the Germans and the Austrians must have partied pretty hard. Yeah, Thorium's got it right there. It's that's brilliant. The WTO coming out against that was outstanding, to be honest with you. It's really, really quite funny. Yeah, and I think it's a brilliant outcome for the Russians. I think it makes me want to be even more long Gazprom than I was previously. I agree, Joanna. Like, the deep state versus Trump is too simplistic. There are factions everywhere. The whole thing is, I think this whole week has been nothing but like this week of utter desperation. From the Alex Jones banning to all the sanctions to all of this stuff. I think it's just all of these people absolutely losing their minds, and knowing that if they do not blitzkrieg us between now and the midterms, they're going to lose the midterms, and then everything gets out of control quick. Reconciliation. I'm glad. Thank you for that. That was a fun thing. Jeff called me at like 6 o'clock and asked me if I could do the 11 o'clock show, and I went, yeah, absolutely, let's do it. And that was a fun interview. I enjoyed doing it. So I like that kind of format. That long form format is great. You get to sit and chat with somebody for an hour with a non-confrontational setting. Really good. So big shout out to Jeff Rentz for inviting me on last night. And then at the same time, I'm like texting back with the guys from Sputnik, and they want to be on this morning at 9 o'clock. I'm like, oh my God. Okay, cool. So you should be able to he'll probably have it up as an individual thing. I'll see if I can find it and post it to my website. Are we witnessing the slow decline of the American empire? Yes. WDM, is this like some crazy poker game where there's just a bunch of bluffers going all in and all be busted if they lose? Yeah, except that the Russians and the Chinese have the money to bail everybody out that's actually under the gun. I think the midterms are going to be a shit show. I don't know that they'll be rigged. I know that there's going to be immense levels of cheating, and I know there's going to be immense levels of legal challenges and late found ballots. There's going to be stacks of ballots found in the corner somewhere, like we're seeing this week in Ohio. Okay, we're gonna tell me that you don't see multiple lawsuits on every election that every strategically important election that the Democrats lose. Don't tell me that there's not going to be lawsuits ready to be filed the next morning, alleging Russian interference. Tell me I'm wrong. That there won't be a dozen lawsuits. Kissinger is an old fool who says, yeah, we should do that. Now, tell me how we're going to do that. How in the hell are you going to push the Russians away from the Chinese at this moment in time, having told the Russians in every way, manner, shape, or form that we are not agreement capable? I am not kidding about election meddling. It will be insane. Oil is not the issue. Gas is the issue. We can't ship LNG to the Europeans and compete with Russia. That's not the issue. Bakken oil is not really a threat to the Russians. It's more a threat to the Saudis. And there's a reason why. Bakken oil is all light sweet crude. It's not about numbers. Russian oil, for the most part, is medium sour crude. And refineries, most of the refineries in the world are geared towards medium sour crude. Because that's where most of the oil produced in the world is medium sour. And part of the reason why the Russians have been so angry about the oil pricing system, the petrodollar system, is that both WTI and Brent crude are light sweet crude benchmarks. Urals grade is medium sour. Guess what? The Petro-Yuan contract, the Chinese contract, futures contract, is for medium sour oil. So that is right in the wheelhouse of the Saudis, the Russians, and the Iranians, not the North Sea Brent, WTI, or Venezuela. What's my yeah, there will be no air between the Russians and the Chinese until the Americans are brought to heel. After the Americans are brought to heel, after we're brought to a tripolar world, which I think Trump is working towards, but is getting massive pushback from within the deep state, the Davos crowd, and everybody else. So Bakken and Permian are not a long-term worry for the Russians, because we don't buy a whole lot of Russian oil. So I'm okay with the United States refining its own oil. The people who will get the benefit from the people who get fucked by that more than anybody else will be the Saudis, because they're the marginal supplier of oil to the United States. And the Russians can outproduce all of us at far lower prices. Remember that the Russians can pump profitably at $20 a barrel. Germany's energy numbers are increasing. Their usage numbers are increasing because they're shutting down their nuclear power plants. Who will supply Erdogan with liquidity? The Chinese. Probably. Look, the world is awash in energy. What's my take on Bannon wanting to create an anti-EU coalition in Europe? Is Trump behind him, or is he a free agent? I have no idea what's going on with him and Bannon. I think that Bannon and the people who stand behind him, and I can't remember their names, going up against George Soros and the EU, I think is great. They don't pay $200 a month to workers in Russia. The wages in Russia are far better than that. They pay in rubles. $20 a barrel is at 55 rubles to the dollar. At 67 rubles to the dollar, it's like 16. That is not the median wage in Russia. The median wage in Russia is $24,000 a year. Dude, go look up per capita purchasing power GDP, please. The numbers are stark. They're right there. They're right there staring you in the face. In purchasing power parity numbers, because that's all that matters, what it buys you. Median wages in Russia are currently around $24,785. Are $24,785 a year and rising. What do I think of Rand Paul visiting Moscow and the timing of these new sanctions? Who do you think is pissing in the punch bowl? Interesting. I think that Rand Paul going to the Moscow was brilliant. on his part. I've said it before that he's setting himself up to be Trump's main agent in the main ally in the Senate after the midterms. And going forward, he's doing the work that he's doing some of the diplomatic work that everybody else is abdicating, right? So Rand Paul going to Moscow is very, very important. I got lost a little bit as I read some of your comments because some of them are very interesting. I think it's important, of course, the timing on these sanctions are probably timed with that. We could not have Russian-U.S. relations improving before the midterm elections. We have to have a boogeyman. We have to have a scapegoat. And we have to continue to push Russia farther and farther away from Trump and from the U.S. because, look, Putin has all the goods. He has all the information necessary to blow the lid on Browder and Edmund Safra and the takeover of the attempt to take over of Russia and the raping of Russia in the 1990s and everybody on Wall Street, the Solomon Brothers to Goldman Sachs, the HSBC and the rest of them are all freaking dirty and they all should be in jail. Every goddamn one of them. And our Congress and our senators have been protecting these people for years, and we all know it. Trump is getting bad advice from Pompeo, and so Rand gets to go to Russia and gets to bring back information that's solid. All right. No, there's still a lot of work to be done in Russia. There's no doubt. Reconciliation. I'm not arguing that there's not a lot of work to do. There's not a lot of corruption to clean up. There's not a lot of things everything has to improve. But as far as the oil industry is concerned, they pump oil out of the ground at $9 a barrel. The state takes another $11 on top of that. They're profitable at $20 a barrel. With a free floated ruble, they are. With the ruble, managed at 30, no, they're not. And that's where they were. That's where they were vulnerable back in 2014, and the United States never expected Putin to free float the ruble. Never expected him to open up an economic internal liberalization package. Never expected to get the Chinese to step in with ruble yuan swap lines. Never expected any of that, and that's why it didn't work. And that template is going to be used in Turkey and it's going to be used in Iran. What's the deal between Saudi Arabia and Canada? I have no idea. I have no idea. So yeah, I mean, who cares, right? The Saudis are going to boycott. How much overlap is there between the Saudi economy and the Canadian economy? I think they said they're not going to buy the $12 worth of Canadian wheat that they buy or something. I have no idea. Yeah, I would like to know, Queensberry. If Queensberry's here and he's got some insight as to what's going on between the Saudis and Canada, I'd love to hear it. Putin's made the visa issue prominent. He wants that changed. He wants it to be easy. He wants it to make it easier for people to get visas to come in and out of the country. There you go. Yeah, when the Erdogan is not going to give in. Mark my words. The only way Erdogan is going to give in is if they remove him from power. So we're hoping for regime change in Turkey. If he was going to cave here, he would have caved a while ago. But Erdogan's not stupid. He knows the U.S. is losing. Erdogan's look. It's actually a tell. The fact that Erdogan refuses to give in here is your tell that the United States is losing all of its power and prestige in the region. Because a guy like Erdogan goes with the winner. Whoever is perceived to have the upper hand, Erdogan will be with them. If he's defying the United States, it's because he knows that the United States has nothing they can hurt him with. It's about human rights? Oh my God. Are you kidding me? So the Saudis, because they can't handle getting criticized at all, because they've always had the Americans to cover themselves. Between the Saudis and the Israelis, you know, I'm at that point where I'm like, really? You guys really do think you still control all the media, don't you? It's really sad. But these guys believe that because they have money that they can just buy whatever the hell they want. Especially the Saudis. The Saudis are terrible. They just splash money around and they buy things. Pray for Mojo, you and me both. So spread the good word, do my bidding for me. Y'all are my first line of amplification, right? Take care, man. Enjoy. I'm gonna be like right behind you. I'm out in like 8 minutes. I must count the minutes down until we're done because I'm exhausted, and I got a long day ahead of me tomorrow. But it's a fun day. I'm taking tomorrow off completely. It's about oil. Of course it is. It's always about oil. Is World War III avoidable? Yes. Very. Don't worry. I wake up every morning annoyed at the world, but I don't worry about the world. Putin's on the job. And I mean that sincerely. That guy fills me with a tremendous amount of confidence that nothing awful is going to happen. No, we don't do the farmer's market anymore. We haven't done the farmer's market buck in over a year. I don't really have a comment on it. I think Queensbury actually has the better comment on Periscope. Is that this is about oil and the Canadians complaining a bit. So I don't really understand what's going on there. I've given it almost no thought whatsoever because I really consider the Saudis at this point an afterthought into geopolitics. I really do. They're completely neutered, other than Yemen. They don't have, I'm more interested in, you guys should be more interested in what's happening in Pakistan. No, we need them to accept dollars exclusively for their oil because they are such a tremendously large exporter. It is a significant portion of dollar demand. And I consider global trade to be the M0 of the world economy. Right? There's M0, M1, M2, M3. And you're wrong. It's not Venezuela. The Pakistan is far more interesting because Imran Khan is not our guy. And now our guys in Afghanistan are looking at a potentially hostile regime in Pakistan. If the sanctions in Russia, with Russia, continue to escalate, the Russians will cut off their airspace to our resupply guys, to resupply our guys in Afghanistan. And then what happens with Incirlik? Do you understand that this is why the United States is now having to finally talk to the Taliban about getting out of Afghanistan, because the walls are falling in. Erdogan is nothing like Maduro. Maduro is an illiterate bus driver. To compare Erdogan to Maduro is ignorant. And I don't mean to be rude, but it's ignorant. Because Maduro is illiterate. Yes. So you've Pakistan to the south, you've got the Russians to the north, you've got Iran, and you've got Turkey. You've got to be able to, in order to maintain supply lines into Afghanistan, you need to have somebody there willing to allow your planes to fly over. The Turks love Erdogan. And he's out there selling this attack on Turkey as a U.S. hybrid war thing, and he's going to be successful with it. And he just smashed the Kurds in northern Syria. What about Imran Khan? Is Debbie Wasserman Schultz in jail yet? Imran Khan is not our guy. That's the point. That's why we kept saying, oh, it's an illegitimate election, and oh no, we want yes. Pakistan is the plan B route for supplying Afghanistan, way more expensive than the Russian assisted one. And guess what? The Russians can cut us off. Don't ever forget that the Russians have the sanctions hammer anyway, because the Russians, of course, produce most of the world's uranium. I think he might. I think that's coming. I don't know who tried to kill Maduro. Could have been us. Could have been staged. Yeah, they do. They're both Sunnis. It would be huge. I don't know. I don't even really speculate at this point. I'm more interested in the structure of the petro, and what they roll out with the Sovereign Bolivar. And I've got a commentary on that in this month's Gold, Goats, and Guns newsletter that I'm not going to go into here because, well, I just released it yesterday, and the people who pay me for my ideas, they should get that. That should sit private for a while. I don't give out everything. All right, we got about another minute or two before I turn into a pumpkin. You guys got anything else you want to ask me about? Imran Khan is not our guy. Do you think China will hit Apple with Apple if the tariff war escalates? Possible. We got a bigger question for you. What if Apple continues to sell iPhones in Tehran? Is Trump going to sanction Apple? Saudi Arabia and Israel's rhetoric or tactics are very, very similar because they both think they control the media, because they both have tremendous control over the media. When will the Iranian rial go up? I don't know. It's going to be rough for the rial for the next 3 months or so until November, and then there has to be a complete shift in has to be a complete shift, right, in Iran's internal usage of currency, right? And the same thing with Turkey. And I haven't been like looking at or trying to follow what's actually transpiring, like the volumes of and of who are transacting how much volume on the Shanghai Oil Exchange, but I can tell you that the success of that oil exchange, and then wait for the London Metals Exchange to start issuing futures contracts and industrial metals. When that starts, it will be a lot easier for these countries to continue to operate their economies without the dollar. And as long as they don't go to the IMF, and as long as they try to go it alone, it'll be a painful transition to get rid of the dollar and to pull their economies off the dollar. But once they do so, they will be free from that point forward. And with every country that does it, and with every dollar that doesn't, with every transaction that's not done in the dollar, the less effect sanctions ultimately have. Cryptocurrency will play a huge role in Iran. I agree, and again, that gets back into the petro, which we'll talk about in a few weeks. Or, if you're a subscriber, we'll talk about it tomorrow afternoon. All right, you guys have a good night. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much for stopping by tonight. We have probably the best discussions on YouTube, and really appreciate everybody's time and attention and all of that. So if you can do me a favor, give this a like and a retweet, like and a subscribe down below, and tell your friends, tell your family. All right, this has been the Golden Goats and Guns Hour. My name is Tom Luongo. You guys have a good night. Keep your stick on the ice.